First thing on the agenda, do we have any requests for bill introductions today? All right, no bills today. Well, committee, we're pleased to have Scott Schultz with us from the Kansas Sentencing Commission, and welcome him to the committee and look forward to hearing what he has on his mind.
Mr. Chair, very little on my mind.
I don't know about that.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, to be back again with you today. I see that you've received the laminates for the grids. I kind of wanted to talk about some of the usual things that I normally will go into, as far as just briefly touch on history of the commission and those type of things. But really wanted to kind of get into, from a committee standpoint, what would be a good opportunity for me to help you when you're looking at, if you're not looking at the grids on a daily basis during the year, which I presume most of you are not, how significant that could be, and what I can do as far as bringing value. I also wanted to answer the question that I know that Representative Carmichael is already thinking, and that is, yes, I am here for yet another year.
I was thinking the very thing was that after this hearing, I wanted to talk to you about that, and I still want to talk to you about it. I'm glad you're here.
Very good. Thank you, sir. So we're just going to kind of touch on a few things. I want to go over again. I know that most of you, or if not all of you, went and listened to my anatomy of a legislative bed space impact from last year, but I kind of wanted to touch on that again, and why some of those things, maybe some things to look at when you do see that. As you know, the commission it provides all of those, especially for this committee, but also in House Judiciary and Senate Judiciary, will provide you with not just a fiscal impact, but actually a bed space impact of how the language of a bill is going to potentially affect prison bed space. So as you know, we have a 17-member commission. I've got all of those folks lined up there. The chair, as well as Representative Heiberger, are actually the House representatives that were appointed by leadership. We also have two Senate folks, and then a pretty good cross-section then of criminal justice professionals in the state, and we vet a lot of things through the commission, and then bring some of those recommendations to you. So I'll commit that to your review. Just briefly, there was prison overcrowding back in 1988. There was a court order to potentially reduce the population by 100 inmates a month, and you could imagine how that went over, as far as having to release at least 100 a month. And so talk started at that particular time to look at sentencing guidelines, and other states had been doing that at the time, Minnesota, Oregon, Washington. And so Kansas started looking at it as well, and the Kansas Sentencing Commission was established at that particular time. One of the things that several things that they were looking at was disparity. As a former prosecutor, I can say without a doubt, because I started actually when the guidelines went into effect back in 1993, and that was we had a system of indeterminate sentencing. And so I practiced in Shawnee County, and then I went out to Garden City and practiced in Finney County. And some of the smaller jurisdictions in Scott County, for example, they may have a burglary once every 2 or 3 months. We had a whole stack in Shawnee County on Thursday's docket. And so you can see how those changes, as far as how the court and the system itself may treat that type of crime a little bit differently in Shawnee County than you would be in Scott County. So part of the guidelines that came into being, and that's why you have your grids in front of you, excuse me, is to attempt to make criminal sentencing, and this is for felonies only, mind you, felony sentencing more uniform, and so that it will help all parties involved, including the victims and the defendants, understand, based upon their criminal history and the severity of the crime itself, to give them a better idea of what they can expect to receive as far as a sentence is concerned. And so that's what, there were issues as far as disparity in sentencing as it related to race, as well as the geography that I just talked about. And so the main themes there to develop a sentencing guidelines was proportionality, as well as truth in sentencing. At the time that indeterminate sentencing was going on, folks that would be getting, and you could probably remember, folks that would get 5 to 15 years. Well, they ended up doing about half of that by the time everything was over with. And so there was issues as to, well, we need to get, a little bit more truth in sentencing, a little bit more definiteness, you know what I'm saying, in terms of sentencing. So people can actually understand, does 5 years really mean 5 years, or does it mean 2.5 and a day, for example? So our commission is, as I said, we have 17 members on the commission. We actually have less staff on the commission than we have on the commission. We have 15 that I supervise. And we do a lot of different things as far as our research is concerned. One of those things is I have half of my staff during the legislative session working on these bed space impacts. And so we're tracking all of the bills. Right now, we're at about, I think, 20 to 23 bills, criminal bills that we're actually tracking. And then we then go through the process that we'll go through here in just a few minutes as to how we do it, and then what you actually see on this side in the form of a document. We are the State Statistical Analysis Center for Criminal Justice in the state. What that essentially means is we have the ability to receive and maintain most of the criminal justice data in the state. We have agreements with KBI. KDOC provides us documents, as well as we collect and maintain our own felony sentencing data. That's essentially all by statute, and then that allows us to actually create a database that allows us then to do these things that, as far as the bed space impacts. One of the other things that we are doing as well is that last bullet point down there. In the summer, every year, we do prison population projections for the Department of Corrections. Those are, we get their data that's cut at the end of the fiscal year. We have 6 weeks to turn that around, and then the commission approves that. It's a 10-year projection, and we'll cover that in just a few minutes. What I can tell you, the short Cliff Notes version of that is we're back to pre-pandemic levels as far as capacities are concerned. So that's the big takeaway. I'll go into that a little bit more in detail in a little bit. We do have publications that we do on an annual basis, and those are done for practitioners. We do about, and I do have a desk reference manual. If anybody actually would like a desk reference manual, please contact me or the office, and we can get you one of those. But in addition to that, then we re-edit, if we need to, those particular documents that make up the grids if there's any changes. In particular, this year there was a change that since there was a lot of fentanyl legislation, if you recall last year, that was added it would be more definite on the drug grid, and we'll look at that in just a little bit. But that's essentially our operations side. Our second program that we have is the 2003 Senate Bill 123 program, and that is a program in which about 8 of every $10 that we receive in appropriations goes to the Senate Bill 123 Substance Abuse Treatment Program. This is a program that has expanded. Representative Resman has heard this now twice because he's on our budget committee, but we have actually expanded the Senate Bill 123 program through legislative action 3 times in the last 5 years. The program itself was originally set up back in 2003 for possession offenders, that if they met criteria, they would be allowed to be supervised by community corrections folks out in the community for up to 18 months, and we would pay for that treatment from a state perspective. And so the commission acts as kind of the bank or the bill payer. We have about 5 years ago, we entered into a vendor contract with a company, Beacon, which is now Carillon, and they actually handle those payments that 120 certified treatment providers throughout the state submit those invoices, and we're kind of like a mini insurance company in that we pay for many of the modalities, everything from inpatient treatment all the way to group and family counseling with regard to substance abuse treatment. So that was going along for 15 years. We then requested to add in small sales because we knew that some of those individuals, not all, but some, were actually selling to support their habit and needed assistance, and so that was added. And then again, there was bipartisan support for backing the truck up clear to even pre-trial or pre-charging to diversion, in which the state could actually help pay for substance abuse treatment in a diversion context where the prosecutor and the offender were actually doing diversion, and that we would actually pay for that. So we added that as the RAFT, or Recovery from Addiction Funded Treatment Program. And then last year, we further expanded the program, thanks to your help, from the drug arena into non-person offenses. So low-level offenders are potentially eligible for Senate Bill 123. We call it Senate Bill 123 Plus to kind of distinguish it, and that started in July. That particular program, like I said, occupies almost 85% of our budget. Again, it's a pass-through that, with the $10 to $12 million that we have in that program, I have three individuals that are highly qualified and do a fantastic job in being able to administer that program. We get from time to time from academia, we get requests. We have great data to be able to provide, and we're able to provide that in private research contexts. We also, one of the larger components since I came on as executive director was I wanted to do education and do a better job of what we were doing. Thankfully, a past staff attorney was willing to come on as a special projects director, and she is now doing all of our webinars. She's able to do continuing legal education for attorneys, judges, as well as probation officers. And so very good opportunity for us to reach out and to do outreach in the criminal justice community. And we continue to expand that particular aspect of the agency every year. One of the things that we do ad hoc research, if the governor requests it, if you have a bill that you're thinking about submitting, happy to run that prior to the bill introduction and look at it and give you an idea of what kind of bed space we're looking at. So please, again, we offer our services to be able to help you in making those type of decisions. I've kind of touched on the rest of those as far as the items are concerned, but again, because of the legislative changes, because of the appellate courts and different interpretations that occur throughout the year, we do have an obligation to do revisions with regard to the guidelines. Again, just a quick rundown in terms of as a refresher for the grid. On the vertical axis on the left, you've got 1 through 10 for non-drug crimes. 1 is the most serious, 10 is the least serious, and then as you go across horizontally from left to right, you have an individual that has been involved in the system quite a bit with 3+ person felonies, all the way down to potentially no record or a misdemeanor offense. And so based upon that conduct, we're able to actually determine in months, which those numbers constitute, where that individual is looking in terms of where they fall on the grid. We also have delineations in terms of whether or not they fall in a presumptive probation box, which are in those that are in the bottom right-hand corner. And then you have your border boxes, which are those, I think they're showing up as blue. The probation ones are showing up as green. The border boxes are those in which the court, they're technically presumptive imprisonment boxes, but the court can actually decide one way or the other whether or not to place the individual in prison or grant them probation. From a statistical standpoint, border boxes normally are sentenced to probation about 70% of the time. Based upon the severity levels of the crime, then for those individuals that receive probation, then they have the court has options that are normally statutory in nature. Depending on the severity level, they can receive anywhere from 12 to 18 to 24 to 36 months. There are some sex crimes that they can sentence up to 60 months on supervision. That is the probation term. For the folks that, and we call it the back door, front door is coming in, obviously going to prison. The back door is what happens once you're released from prison, and that is what we call post-release supervision. And again, based upon the severity level of your offense, you will have anywhere from 12 to 24 to 36 months of post-release supervision in which parole will supervise you. The drug grid is similar in nature. As I indicated here in red, we added although it's been there, we decided for purposes of practitioners, we decided to add it so that that would be more easily available. It's my understanding after talking with Jeff that there possibly is a bill to increase penalties on fentanyl, and so that may be a situation in which we would then have to go back in and revise that for next year. But for now, that is the penalties for fentanyl fall under the same ones as cocaine. I would say, just in passing, as I'm talking about that, is that actually we're seeing, after cocaine had trailed off for quite a few years, we are actually seeing a resurgence of that in some of our data as far as convictions and sentences are concerned. So I've touched on this a little bit. Why presumptive guidelines? It attempts to establish equity among offenders in typical cases so that that offender that is black, white, Native American is going to get the same shake as the same other individual, whether they're white, whether they're black, whether they're Native American, whether they're in Scott County or whether they're in Shawnee County. So those are the type of things that that it is looking to try and alleviate. It also allows, there is flexibility in the guidelines, and so it does allow for, in atypical cases, it allows for individuals that most of the time it's when crimes are of a heinous nature and are of such an aggravated nature that they have to go above what the guidelines actually say. It allows for that, and those are departures, either departing up as far as time is concerned, or length of sentence, as well as whether or not they would be in the presumptive prison or presumptive probation range. So it does allow for flexibility in that regard. It does require, of course, evidence to actually show that a departure is warranted. And that's the term there is substantial and compelling reasons to depart. Finally, the last is from a statistical standpoint, it allows for more certainty in predicting prison populations. We would not be able to provide the information on those projections that we do without having guidelines, because then, you know, with an indeterminate sentencing situation, we would never ever know, and so it provides more certainty for projections. I wanted to kind of touch mainly on this particular point, and again, this is your legislative bed space impact, and break it down essentially on certain things. What I will say is We understand that you have less time to read things, and so 15-page documents are not going to be of assistance to you too much. So what we try and do as best we can is to try and give you again, the Cliff Notes version of the impact right up front, and that's what we call the box. It's an easy way to just look at what kind of admissions, what kind of prison beds we're talking about. If you want to look farther into that, then you can actually look farther into the document. But that just gives you a quick look at that. We do summaries of the bill just for staff purposes. I know that you guys have bill briefs and everything else, but that just helps us, especially when the bill starts getting amended. That helps us track where we're at, because we go back when bills are amended and redo the bed space impact. So that is kind of at least helps us track what the bill's about and what we need to be looking for. The findings section essentially is the kind of the meat of the impact in terms of how we got to the recommendation that we got, and then finally what that assessment is. The proportionality comparison, we added that about probably 6-7 years ago, and it is solely there to again, to try and assist you as much as possible. And I'll show that graphically here in just a second. But again, this gives you an idea of what exactly the box is. It's again just a quick look as far as letting you know. Now, as I've said multiple times over multiple years, this certainly is not, and we don't expect it to be, definitive in your decision-making process. This is just another tool for you as legislators to be able to make a determination of cost-benefit in some cases as to in this situation, or if it was going to cost 34 to 50 to 60 beds for this particular bill, is that worth it based upon what the bill is presenting and the need, and so in no way obviously is it definitive, but again provides more information to you. The findings section, as I said before, gives you a specific breakdown. We normally look at the previous fiscal year, so it's the latest data that we have, but a lot of times you'll see in there bills that want to be amended. And we look at the bill. We'll even give you data that goes back 5-6 years, because a lot of times there won't be any convictions, there won't be any sentences. In some cases, there's not even arrest. And so that, again, while that may mean that this bill is important, you can actually see in the background that, okay, well, maybe we're not going this isn't going to get much play, but when it does, it's important. So keep that, keep those things in mind when you're looking through those, because from time to time, we'll actually bump it back several years so that you can actually see that this may be a relatively little used statute. By the same token, there may be other instances in which you actually get quite a few. So that is the proportionality comparison. Again, as I said, usually the last page of the impact statement, and what it's really there for is so that you can actually make comparisons, and you're not looking in a vacuum of these particular offenses, because it's very easy to look at a bill and say, well, based upon the testimony that we heard, we should be increasing that. Well, that may be true, but if it's originally filed as for example, a level 3, does that defective muffler, is that the same thing as kidnapping? Those type of things that at least you can make comparisons. In some cases, you may say, yes, this particular offense rises to the level based upon the conduct of a level 3 kidnapping or a level 2 rape, for example. But it just gives you, again, more information as to this, if you agree that this is what the penalty is going to be increased to, this is what ball field is going to be playing in with some of these other offenses. We've heard several times that that's been very helpful in looking at things that maybe it's not a severity level 3, but it should be a 4. those type of things. So I hope that has been somewhat helpful anyway in terms of looking at some of those things that how that impact statement can be helpful to you when you're looking at bills. One of the things we do, another thing that we do is an annual report, just to kind of give the community the ability to understand what kind of trends are going on. I'm going to cover FY22. Most of these are relatively similar year after year. They don't change a whole lot. So this is a pretty good representative. I would guess that we're in the process of finishing up 2023 data. I am very happy to report that we actually are working with a vendor right now to, and have been for the last about a year and change, to digitize the journal entries that all of the counties actually submit to us. And in doing so, we will hopefully be almost, not quite, but almost real time as far as our data is concerned. And so we will be able to, by the time 2 weeks has gone by, we'll be able to actually see that. And we're developing, for annual report purposes as well, dashboards that on our website that are going to be very robust, very changeable or modifiable based upon who the interested parties are when they're looking at the data. And so I will be able to take Harvey County data and compare it to Sedgwick County data or other medium-sized counties and be able to see, because we have a lot of different stakeholders that are looking at that data. We're trying to do our best to actually make it even easier for them to consume that. And so I'm very excited about that. We currently have a 146-page PDF that we set out every year. Not many people read that cover to cover, as you might expect. So having it visually, doing visualizations and having it visually presentable is something that we're very, very excited about. So most of the time I get, what are our top offenses? In this particular case, this slide shows you for prison, probation, and jail sentences. Now keep in mind the difference between prison and jail. Your line of demarcation is essentially misdemeanors or a year. Anything usually less than a year goes to jail. Anything above that and a felony will go to prison. So in this instance, we do have some leftover DUI jail sentences, and prior to the change in the law a couple years ago, there were folks that were doing the jail sentence. Of this, it makes up 10,813 sentences. And so as you can see, 4 out of 40% of that is drugs. Burglary and theft make up a pretty large portion, and even DUI to some degree. Most of that is, I wouldn't say most of that, but a higher percentage of that occurs in Johnson County. And I don't know that I've been asked that multiple times, and I don't know we've actually looked at that in terms of having folks coming over from Missouri that are picking up those DUIs, but that is that bumps the numbers up quite a bit, and Johnson County is normally head and shoulders over everybody else as far as that. But that kind of gives you a flavor for non-drug and drug offenses as to what tops the list. We also do demographic information, as you may expect, so that we can actually track gender, we can track race of the offenders. These are always in a situation in which, from a minority standpoint, they are not reflective of the normal population in Kansas, which, for example, the black population, depending on census things, 6 to 8%, something in that, or in that range. There is always a disparity there as far as the African American population. Interestingly, the distribution of, as far as the male, the female, Keep in mind, this is for all the sentences, so even those that are getting probation versus just going to prison. But there has been a change over the years. When I first started, 92% of the folks that were imprisoned were male. It's about, I think, 85% now. So there are more females that are being incarcerated. We do collect ethnicity information as well as age of the offenders. This particular age chart is very representative of research as well as what happens in other states. And that, as you can see, is, you have individuals that are aging out over time. They get tired of recidivating and committing crimes, and some of them don't, but there are some that do. And so on the whole, folks, as they age, are not committing the crimes that the younger folk are. That's possibly true as well. We can, thankfully with our data, we can actually break down things by many and slice and dice those things. You can see here, as far as the number of admissions to Department of Corrections was 3,853. That was an increase over 2021. Obviously, for those of you that have been here long enough, you know that COVID was as horrific as the pandemic was. It was a godsend for prison capacity. And that's kind of weird to say, but the prison population went down significantly as a result of the pandemic. And as we will see, it is back on track in terms of the number of sentences that we are seeing. I've covered the genders a little bit as far as the male population. White offenders continue to be about 7 out of every 10 offenders being admitted to, and that's pretty consistent for prison admissions. Probation, we had compared to FY21, there were 120 more sentences, 6,529 total. And then that gives you a breakdown that's almost half and half as far as non-drug sentences and drug sentences. Again, this gives you an idea of top 10 offenses for probation non-drug sentences. And so all those folks that are on probation for non-drug sentences, that gives you an idea of who are receiving those sentences. The burglary, ag battery, theft kind of lead the way in that regard. When it comes to probation drug sentences, most of what we have are either possession, distribution and sale, or manufacture. Don't have a lot of manufacture anymore, just simply because the cartels make it so cheap to bring it up from Mexico. And so people are not manufacturing like they normally are. There are also police situations in which, even if you were charged with manufacture, it's automatic prison. And so there's plea negotiations sometimes that go on that end in a distribution charge or something of that nature. So this is a breakdown of folks that actually got probation that you can see. Because possession is actually the least severe drug offense versus the rest, manufacture and distribution, they make up the lion's share of those sentences that receive probation. This just kind of gives you a breakdown of the top, I wouldn't say the top 4, but we just call them the big 4 in terms of the county and how they shake out as far as the number. Sedgwick County, to some degree, which is interesting because it's actually gone down over the years. And what you see is more crime as it relates here, more crime being created and committed outside of those big 4 counties. When I first started, the other counties had about 51%. And that was about a little over 10 years ago, 12 years ago. And Sedgwick County essentially had 1 out of every 5 felonies. You're seeing more crime occurring in the rural areas, and it's being prosecuted. So as I indicated, every July we get data from DOC and provide 10-year prison population projections. We have a computer model that we utilize, as well as we have a couple consensus meetings that we bring together DOC personnel as well as judicial personnel to talk about potential assumptions that we need to make as far as this model is concerned, because we have data, which is the previous year's data, but we also need to talk about, are there going to be any changes within DOC, any policy issues that need to be, is the warden doing something different as far as release procedures, those type of things. And so we roll those assumptions into the data that we currently have, and then are able to actually give the 10-year projections. This just kind of gives you an idea of where we have been for the last 10 years and what the consensus group would actually look at as far as our total prison population. I've covered that a little bit as to, you can see when COVID started, things crashed, but now they're actually coming back. This is prison admissions versus releases. These are significant because obviously if you have more releases than you have admissions, you're going to have less population over time. That obviously was the case during COVID. As of last year, that process has reversed and there was more admissions. The direct new court commitments, these are essentially, you're in court, you're sentenced, you go to prison. This is, as you can see, it spiked back up in 23 as well as 22. We essentially are right back up at pre-pandemic levels as far as those commitment levels are concerned. When an individual is placed on probation and they violate because they're not doing the certain things that their terms and conditions of probation require, they have the ability, obviously, to be revoked and sent to prison. Sometimes those are terms and conditions that are violated that require prison imposition. Sometimes they've committed new offenses. And so we document that. Obviously, the nice part here is they obviously are down from a high of 2018, but they are still, we still saw them tick up from last year. Again, I talked about the front door and the back door. There are folks that, surprisingly, that go on parole or post-release supervision, and they're not compliant. And so this represents the folks that actually get sent back into the facility, which has increased from 2021. Once we do the projections, this is essentially what we see by offender group. And this is gives you an indication as to, over a 10-year period, what kind of increases that the commission is estimating as far as these particular offender groups. We have, our estimate in total is a 26.4% increase, which is equivalent to 2,353 inmates from the current population that was actual prison population on June 30, 2023. And so in tracking that, it kind of informs, when you look at some of these, and on the right-hand column, you can see which may be a good idea to maybe inform some policy-making decisions. And that's kind of how the commission looks at some of these things in terms of, if we see we're going to get a huge amount of increase, are there things that we can actually do at those severity levels to potentially mitigate the increases? Now, the commission holds our philosophy and ideals that those individuals that commit serious offenses and the really serious offenses need to be in prison. And there are just some folks that need to be taken out of society and for our public safety. There are some folks, though, that we can actually do other things with, alternative means, rather than just put them in prison, increase their sentence. That's kind of the area where the commission operates and brings suggested recommendations to you, so that we can actually keep those folks. And because we start obviously having capacity issues, if everybody that violates the law has to go to prison, there has to be some measure there. Otherwise, the cost of incarcerating an individual potentially outweighs that of the punishment that's involved. And so the projections themselves are important from that perspective, but also from a perspective of it allows legislators to understand that there may be a capacity issue here coming up in a couple of years. It allows DOC to actually plan ahead because, as you might expect, you can't build a prison in 6 to 12 months. That's, there's architectural drawings and, 2-3 years of planning that go into that before ground is broken. So this informs them and again, it's a tool for them to understand that we're increasing the population based upon that computer model. And I'll show you, because we are giving projections, we do track that on a monthly basis. But this is what it looks like in graphical form. This is both female and male population. We started as it became important the last couple of years. We started including a staff capacity in that, and that changes from time to time based upon what data we receive from KDOC, because they are making room in their facility. The same thing with capacity, but it gives you an idea that we're essentially at capacity, staff capacity right now, and that from a total capacity, we are a couple years off if the projection model holds. The male population kind of looks very similar since you have most of the population are male, but that gives you a 2029 projected capacity for them. The females are a little bit sooner. Their capacity and staff capacity just happen to be the same at 932. So like any good agency, we track we have a monthly monitoring report, which you see on this slide. This represents what we projected when we did the projections and what that actual population was. We normally 5% on either side is a good percent error rate that you would see there on the right-hand column. I make our research folks get within 2%. That's what our goal is. Sometimes we're 0.5%, 1/100%, and that tells us that the model is working. And so you can see during the course of this past year, we were looking pretty good at the beginning of the year, and we, for the most part, finished out as far as. And why is this important? Why does this matter? If the model is working, it can be relied upon so that if there is collaboration or corroboration for building a prison, that's going to cost millions of dollars. And if we can actually look to a model that actually can say, well, we've got a couple more years, that's potentially going to save taxpayer dollars if we can even push it out for an extra couple of years. So that is the rationale for us tracking that. This gives you this year already where we're at. As you can tell, in October, things started skipping. Some of that we believe is due obviously to the OJA security incident, and what we were seeing was less sentencing journal entries coming to our office, and obviously there's paper that's piled up in a lot of the clerk's offices that they're working their way through to get scanned back in, and so we've actually seen a decrease in prison population, as well as sentencing journal entries that are coming in. And so, so we are even through December, we were getting, you can see there at 3%. This gives you, again, another graphical depiction of what our projected population for that is, and that since October, we've seen decreasing population, male and female. And as I said, it's, again, not definitive, but I think that the OJA situation has not helped the processing of those sentences. This is essentially just a breakdown, again, just so that you can look at splitting up male and female and how that percent of error is concerned. You're talking about, somewhere in the neighborhood of we're incarcerating almost 10,000 individuals, male and female, just to give you a scope of things. Our female population, just because it's so small, even if we're off 10 or 15, that starts increasing the error rate quite a bit more than the male population. And so we try the female population has increased at a faster rate than the male population in the last couple of years. And so the trick has been to try and determine whether or not that's going to continue or not, because it was at quite a large rate. So that we can finish up here real quick, again, I talked about the SB 123 program that the commission administers, and this is just kind of gives you an idea of kind of the trends that we're looking at within that program. Expansion, data collection. We were, during COVID, we went to telehealth as far as allowing for codes there to make things much easier for the offenders to be able to communicate with their treatment providers, and that has continued post-pandemic. This gives you an idea of the total expenditures that we had for the program, $7.3 million. Which was an average of $4,212. We believe this is obviously a fantastic value compared to the $30,000+ for an inmate on an annual basis. We try and those costs are going to continue to go up just simply because we try to, the treatment providers in your neck of the woods. Some of them are mom and pops, some of them are well-established entities that operate all over the state, but they obviously are a cash flow business, and we understand that. And so getting them paid in a timely way, but also being competitive in the rates that we pay are important. In some cases, those facilities will actually hold SB 123 beds for us, and that's why judges like the program, because they can get folks in. The time to treatment becomes even more important when you have a criminally involved individual versus somebody else that may not be. This gives you an idea of who those providers are. MIR leads the way, CKF, New Chance, Doolittle, those are the top, and then there's, again, we have about 120 of those providers. You may recognize some of those folks that are providing. We certify them for 4 years, and that they're doing the type of treatment that we're requesting for this particular for these particular folks. This gives you a breakdown of monthly payments. We're about $600,000 a month that we're paying out through our vendor Carillon, and as I said, those are for those myriad of services that I spoke about. This is an interesting slide just because it kind of gives you a comparison of what actually is being treated. Certainly meth is, we talk about fentanyl a lot, but meth still takes the prize in terms of, granted it's decreased a little bit as far as they're treating in this particular program, but it still is almost 70% of the diagnosis. The modalities, this again gives you an idea of we're doing intermediate inpatient treatment all the way down to relapse prevention, and other peer support is also a big one that we added a couple of years ago. So that you understand, I talked about the RAF program a little bit. We currently have 22 offenders in that program. That is increasing. That actually is probably well over double from last year. And so we're hoping that that will continue. The prosecutors will continue to adopt that. The small sales that were done in SB 18 several years ago, it was actually 50 the year before, and it was 34 last year. So it's gone from 1 to those numbers. And now we're expanding into the non-person felonies. So we're very excited about that because we know that we're probably going to double the folks that the offenders we're serving. So with that, thank you for your attention. I appreciate the opportunity again to, I volunteer our services to you at any information that you need. If there are certain bills that cause you pause, that you want to see if there's any data on it, please contact my office. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Scott. And you know, I'll be honest, with all the projections you do and how accurate you are, I can't believe you didn't project the computer ransomware attack and adjust for that in advance.
Those are things that kind of, that the model is hard to actually predict, so.
Well, hopefully we're getting that behind us. It sounds like that's the case. The amount that we're spending on treatment, $4,400 roughly per offender, how successful are we, or how are you measuring success as it relates to that statistic?
Yeah, we actually, several years ago, had University of Cincinnati analyze the program. The data that they took, they compared it, SB 123 offenders versus 123 offenders. They found that rearrest rates were less with 123 offenders. They found that those folks that were that completed the program successfully were 75% less likely to reoffend. That's a good number, and so it also allows for your communities to provide other resources to folks when we can actually utilize state funds to do it. And so now you're freeing up monies for other potential resources to be available to that offender or to somebody else too.
Certainly appreciate that. Committee questions, Representative Smith.
Appreciate your presentation as always, and I'm going to try to give you my annual question, but I'm going to try to be creative this time, Scott. We talk about the number of people who sit in jail for different violations, and the folks that aren't involved in this on a day-to-day basis. It may seem that when you say an individual's in there on, say, burglary or theft, it may seem that, okay, so what, they went to prison. Why didn't everybody who committed a burglary go to prison, right? So that might be a question. And so there are things that mitigate and aggravate an individual, whether or not they may go to prison. If an individual sitting in there in burglary, that may not be the only charge, right? So can we talk about concurrent charges, or sentences rather? And also, how many folks are sitting in prison on a first-time offense for anything? You know, percentage-wise, and ballpark is fine. I know you guys don't delve into that a great deal.
What I can actually get that information for you. I don't have it on top of my head, Representative. But we do actually, we're able to when you're looking in terms of we can break down the number of felonies that are sentenced by where they fall on the grid. So if you're wanting to know eyes, for example, and how many people fell into that category versus all of them, we can actually get that information for you.
Might be useful. Yeah.
There are quite a few folks that are first-time offenders, and in those situations, it depends on a lot of times on any programs or any diversion programs that those prosecutors actually have that are willing to allow those first-time offenders, or maybe they've done some several misdemeanors, and now they've graduated. That sometimes makes a difference in jurisdiction to jurisdiction. But yeah, we can actually get. But to your first point in terms of the burglary, yes, definitely. The court has the criminal history worksheet when they actually sentence the individual, so they can actually see their juvenile record, they can see what their adult record is, and sometimes that actually, if there's leeway there, that makes certainly, and you know that, makes a difference which way they go in terms of whether this person has not been compliant in the past on probation before. There's a myriad of variables there that may land a recidivist in prison versus somebody that is an H or an I.
And I think you stated it well, a myriad of variables, right? A lot of moving parts. And so when we look at these things, I think it's important. You know, I've been around a jail for 30 years, and I have an idea of what it looks like in our county anyway when it comes to how people graduate to prison, right? Oftentimes, we're going to see them many times before they ever get to that point that that's it, we're done, we're gonna graduate you. So when it comes to drug sentencing, you know, one of the questions that comes up, the D4, D5s, folks that are sitting in there on the low-level drug felonies, what these numbers don't, and I bring this up every time, Scott, I know that, this gets a little old, but for those that haven't heard it, it's important to note that sometimes there are plea negotiations involved, right? And so in those plea negotiations, you may have committed a drug level 3, but in order to skip trial, we may go to a plea negotiation where we'll just go ahead and charge you at the level 4 if you agree to serve time, right? And so that may be a number of these folks who are sitting in prison when it comes to these numbers. Why are you sitting in there on a D5? Why are you in there on a simple possession charge? Well, it was part of the plea negotiation, possibly, you know, and probably. And I would invite you to expound on that if you'd like to.
Yeah, I'm very excited, and it's refreshing to hear your questions every year. But what I can tell you this year is that we recently started receiving data from OJA that will actually allow us to track that offender from complaint through conviction. So we will actually be able to see the flow of how that case started, whether it was charged, pled down, and what that actually picture is going to look like. So I'm excited to be able to I can't guarantee next year when we talk that I can be able to pull out a slide here that will be able to address specifically that, but I can tell you that we at least have the data now to be able to have in our hands, thanks to OJA, to be able to track that. Because until now, we essentially had KBI arrest data, nothing in the middle, and then sentencing data. So I'm very happy that we should be able to that picture should become clearer.
Yeah, and you know, I'm excited with you. We can nerd out together on that data, so that'd be great. Thank you.
Certainly. Additional questions, committee? Yep, Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. I'm attempting to avoid a conference with a city council member, so I need to ask about another 25 minutes worth of questions.
Negative.
All right, it's your fault. You may have answered this, and I wasn't paying careful attention as usual. If we were to look at all of the statutory changes that we made last year, and we took all of the bed impact statements and added the increases and deducted the decreases, do we have somewhere in this bottom line aggregated data as to how many bed spaces the legislature's enactment last year or the year before cost or benefited? Because I know I look at these bills in isolation oftentimes. And I say, okay, well, that's only 25 beds. They got room for 25 beds. Well, if I do that 10 times, it's 250 beds. Is that type of data in the report, or how hard is it to find out? Because it's a scorecard for me to kind of keep track of overall, what am I doing?
Yeah, great question. And what we normally do, and I'll make sure that you're on the email list if you're not, is that normally at the end of the month during the session, we will send out a tally of all of those bills that are currently in play and what our bed impact has been. So then you can actually see based upon those from the Senate side as well as the House side.
And is that in the form of offered, passed, introduced, or is it just passed legislation? Because as you know, we don't really get anything passed around here in the last couple of weeks when we bundle it all up and run it across.
It will be up to date in terms of what the amended version is. So if you get something at the end of March, it will be whatever the current bill status is, whatever that bill has been amended to.
We have a bill come into our committee, we amend it, we pass it, we send it to the floor. That gets it tallied. And then at the end of the session, when I look back and say, what kind of a mistake have I made this year? Do we have totals that say, my gosh, you filled up 500 beds last year, John?
We will be able to note the bills that actually passed and what that total would be, yes.
Right. And ultimately, that's the bottom line scorecard for me. Thank you.
All right. Well, I'm not seeing any additional questions. Scott, thank you very much for all of your work and all of your effort. A couple of just things to make mention of quickly. First of all, welcome to Chairman Smith for joining us. This is his first in-person meeting in 3 weeks. We know that you've had your hands full of recent, so not a problem. Also like to recognize our friend Boog Heiberger, who has been joined us online today. Grateful to, well, we saw his smiling face a little bit earlier anyway, but grateful to have him back as part of. You still with us,
I'm
Boog?
back.
All
I'm back.
right.
I had a little bit of physical therapy to go to, but sorry I'm not there with you. Thanks for your support. I'll be back as soon as I can.
All right. Glad to hear that, my friend. Glad to hear your chipper voice.
Okay.
All right. And if there's nothing else, committee will be adjourned. Thank you.